right, here we go. Let's get this started. Once again, I'm not exactly sure when these lives start. I need to go back to rewatching them and really paying attention to the beginning, but I have a feeling that we are absolutely live right now. All right, I am muted. Let's go. Okay, I am going to keep this chat window up over here just in case somebody hops in, but I will not expect it. All right, so welcome back to this episode of the book club discussion. We are, of course, going over Death in the Silent Places. You cannot see it that close. There we go. We're getting smarter on this show here, Death in the Silent Places. So this is an excellent read. This is actually a funnier book than I had anticipated. It is incredibly gory, especially in the first chapter when they talk about I hate to ruin anything, but the rolling heads of some of the people, quite literally rolling heads that were ripped apart by the Savo man-eaters. So, and lots of just blood and guts and people being ripped up. The second chapter with Mr. C.H. Stigand was also pretty, not quite as gory, but pretty elaborate on a lot of his injuries and the things that he went through. So those are certainly, I did find this funnier, though. Like I said, it's for as gory and as serious as it is with a lot of the kind of the world exploration, or really more of Africa, these first two stories, and kind of the nature of war and things like that. I'm surprised at how funny this is written. The author certainly has like a grim sense of humor, but also incredibly, I guess you could say witty. Like there is like a dry wit to it. And what's funny is actually, I've been watching this other YouTuber recently, R.C. Walden from the Quirky Inquiry. He's got great stuff on all kinds of literature and other books and stuff. But he talked about how this author, I finished this last week, David Sedaris, has some writings and they're pretty funny. And I think this guy has 6 or 7 books out. I don't know if I can find them all in here. But he's got several other books. Yeah, Barrel Fever, Naked, Holidays on Ice, Me Talk Pretty One Day is apparently supposed to be really good. And When You Are Engulfed in Flames. So I picked this up. I found this for $2 at one of our local used bookstores. And I thought, well, you know, I'll at least try one since he was recommended by somebody I watch. And I chuckled a few times. I think this is like a very dry, kind of a sardonic look into his past. And I think that's what a lot of these essays are, is just looks, stories from his past and his family and things like that. And there are some funny moments, but I have laughed more in the first 2 chapters of this book and the way it's written and the situations in here more than this. And I think potentially it's because it's not so expected in here. And here, you know, some of these stories, they start kind of, it's like they're family stories and stuff. So you almost kind of go into it with the expectation of like, oh, I'm going to laugh at some point. And it's like, oh, this is a funny setup. This is a joke. There's a punchline here. So you almost kind of are expecting it. You know, sometimes like when you watch a comedy, you're kind of you're dampening yourself in a way. So, but the unexpectedness of some of the humor in here really got to me. So I do encourage you to give this a read if you haven't already. And hopefully I didn't just ruin the excitement of that, but it is funnier than I anticipated. But anyway, I was just going to go through some of what I picked up on in general, and then also in the 2 individual chapters, and probably keep this kind of short. But as I read through it, you know, I've been marking a lot of but the 2 books we've gone through in general in the club with just notes on which sentences or ideas or whatever I find interesting and want to discuss. Here, I really didn't mark anything, but this I went back through, and as I just flipped through some of the previous reading, and I really only made it through maybe about half of the reading. I've completed the reading, but as I reviewed it, I made it through about half, and a lot of it I realized had settled really well in my brain, and a lot of it came to the forefront as I was kind of doing my review to take some notes and stuff for this show. And I think it really goes to show the power of the narrative of a story or of a book, and how it can impact what you take in. Like Unseen Warfare was very dry it was really good, but it was very dry because it was written by several monks, or written by a monk and edited by monks. And its purpose was intentionally implementing things from scripture and extrapolating that and then applying it. And Libido Dominandi, of course, was a very historical look, even though this is also like a nonfiction historical look at stuff. It's just written so well in that it's an exciting book so far. So I'll be looking over here a little bit as I kind of go through some of my notes, but I was amazed at really how captive this book has me. And it's definitely written in an older style. Like it's written by someone that you feel would be similar to C.H. Stigand and J.H. Henry, or Patterson, excuse me, J.H. Patterson. So kind of these, that old, what is that? I can't even think of it now, but sort of the Monty, what's his name? Who's the guy from like, from A Series of Unfortunate Events, the Snake guy, and a cross between him and the Hunter, really the Hunter from Jumanji. That's how I envisioned the author of this book. Just sort of witty and funny, but also has that kind of hunter aesthetic to him. So what I did find quite fascinating digging into this now is that both of these characters were very experienced hunters and riflemen. And it goes to show really how much practice with yourself and with a weapon, how important that is in times of stress. Like you can't only just practice stuff in a controlled environment, like in a shooting range, or even just reading in a library, right? Like if you're reading at your desk all the time, you'll take a lot of this stuff in, right? But the application of things, or the application of your martial art or your weapons training or your engineering degree or whatever it is, there has to be moments where you apply it and also apply it under stress. And that was something I thought was pretty wild about how in these moments of when like everybody else is freaking out, and sometimes even their closest, like they're supposed to have secondary riflemen. There's a few spots in here where it talks about how he was supposed to reach back and grab a second rifle from somebody standing behind him, and that dude is gone. You know, his backup is totally gone. And in those moments, they're still fast and on it, and there's no thinking, at least from, you know, it's not being written as a narrative from his perspective, but the way the writer describes it is, it's like the stimulus is, I've run out of bullets, I'm going to reach back for my second gun. It's not there. I keep moving. You know, there is no like, where is everybody? Woe is me. How do I adapt? It's like, all right, next move, we're going. Like that failed. Okay, keep moving. And I think it's very telling to, like I said, what it means to not only be practiced in your art or your craft or your whatever it is, but also being able to practice it under stress. And I think, is it like Jocko Willink that talks about that as a Navy SEAL? These guys, and I don't watch too much of him, but I've seen some of his interviews, those snippets where he talks about how they do all the training, but you have to be able to do it under stress. You have to be able to fire your weapon accurately. You have to be able to, you know, perform your activities under very little sleep, under a lot of stress, in the dark, whatever it is, underfed. Otherwise, having those skills is not very applicable because all you can do is perform them in a lab, basically. I will say there's a really great moment from a self-help book, and I don't remember what it was called. I was listening to a summary of it where he talks about how you need to become a master in something, or even better, a master in two things, and that makes you a better sort of tool or weapon, or a better individual in the world of business. And I bring that up because when you read these guys, they are not just like hunters, riflemen, and soldiers. They are linguists. They know multiple languages. One of these guys had written like a dozen books. They obviously were taking measurements and making maps of the land that they were exploring. They were leaders and not only led their people, but they led the native tribes against the man-eaters and things like that. You know, what else were they? Let's see, they were, I had that they were writers, explorers, linguists, hunters, leaders, etc. And it's not just that, that they were just like a soldier. They had multiple facets to them. I don't think either one of them was a painter, but I'm sure you could see where that would lend itself to that level of that triage of skills. But it's sort of like all of those things were things that you have to take and practice in, and you have to work at, and you have to apply for decades. But they all also like point in one direction towards something. Like they all contribute to this sort of well-rounded individual moving in one direction. It's not like he was also good at ballet and that was just an irrelevant skill to anything that he's doing at the time. But both of them had multiple levels of skills that contributed to the direction they were moving with their life. So that's why I brought up the kind of the self-help book was like, if you're going to be a salesman, be good at like public speaking and woodworking, or be good at public speaking and marketing or engineering, or have a filmmaking background and a sales background, and make those two things or three things, whatever, but having two, he said, was kind of the ideal. Make those two things work to make you a unique force in wherever it is that you're going. Because just being a good filmmaker or just being a good writer only gives you, like, there's a lot of other people that are that thing. And I brought up ballet, but like if you have 30 years of ballet experience and you're a writer, you can write stories about ballet, or you can learn to add to the craft of writing the beauty of ballet and the dedication and the mindset of what it takes to get up at whatever time in the morning. I hope that makes sense. Like, take those two things, even if they're polar opposites, and find a way to fuse them together to make the you that you are very unique and very just like honed and powerful. So I thought that was, as I kind of read through both of their sort of intro biography parts pre narrative, they were both just very well rounded in a set of skills that propelled them forward. So what I think was quite wild as well was in their most dire moments. Like I said, he was supposed to, Patterson, I think it was supposed to reach back and pull the rifle from somebody. In their most dire moments, a lot of people fell away, especially the people that were supposed to be most essential to them in those moments. And so, like I said, you read about with Patterson reaching back for that rifle, his rifleman was up the tree. And what did he do? He turned right around and followed suit because he was being chased by a man-eating lion. Did the same thing. Instead of being able to shoot to kill, he then had to retreat. And in that moment, the guy that was supposed to support him the most, keep him alive, back him up, was gone. In the story with Stigand, they talk about how they're kind of like they're being ambushed, and he's leading the pack probably farther ahead than he should, but there's a square formation that they have. And if he were to break away from his patrol or platoon or whatever, it would actually have compromised the entire structure of the way that they were set up. And then they would have been totally defeated. But he didn't. And he stuck with the group as best he could, but he was still alone, and it's kind of funny because they talk about how in that second chapter that no one actually watched him die, and yet they were able to piece together 90% of how it went down. They said there's like these 2 minutes of chaos, and yet in the aftermath they're able to pick up the casings. They have a couple eyewitness accounts of a few moments. They obviously have his body and the way that he died with the spears and stuff like that, and so they piece it together. But his final moments are indicative of the person that he was throughout his whole life. And I think that was something that was kind of the overarching thing that I took from both of these stories is both of these men cultivated a personality and a character, even like a sort of a specter of who they were before they even got to the battlefield, right? There's a couple moments in there where they talk about how these guys are sort of almost like it's like a phantom or a celebrity in a way that no one's really sure. It's like a shadowy, not really sure about this guy. We know he's supposed to be famous for his hunting skills, his military skills, his whatever, but then they get there, right? And they create this aura about them. And then they also lived it until they died. That I thought was fascinating because it showed, again, paired with their practice and training, that those crucial moments leading up to their death, they were consistent all the way through it. The guy Stigand in the second one talks about how he would have seen how getting away from the group could have been beneficial to him to get higher ground or farther away or to retreat or whatever. But him leaving would have compromised, like I said, the entire structure and safety of his whole platoon. So he stayed put. And not only that, but he continued to fire and reload until he ran out of shells or died, until he got speared to death. But those two elements, I think, are just like wildly, they were the influential part that I took from this. Again, like I said, they cultivated the men that they were through their life, and it was genuine. All of the animals that they hunted, the situations they were put in, the people they led, the wars that they fought in. This was like they were real men that were very hardcore, and they were that way until they died. And I forget how Patterson actually, was it an infection that killed him? Let me see if I can find that really quick. I don't remember how Patterson actually died. Anyway, but they, all the way through, even if you, let's say you die of the flu or pneumonia or you get hit by a train or something like that, you can still cultivate a person of upstanding integrity, of morality, of being incredibly ingenious in the way that you do things. Like let's say you're an engineer, like your mindset is always, every problem really is just a challenge. Every obstacle really is like an opportunity, and you can see things that way, and you just continue to bounce and craft and shape, and you're never like hitting the wall and oh, woe was me, and oh, I just can't. No. Every single thing that I run into, I see it like, okay, let's adapt. Okay, let's change. People see that. And it also kind of lends to the character that you are. Or in these guys, in the situation of these gentlemen here, they are just these absolute madmen warriors, but they had to grow into that, maintain it, and then they lived it until they died. And I think that is just powerful, that even if no one sees you in your final moments, and it's entirely possible that you could be entirely left alone, people will remember that. And really, that's all you have after you die is these fragmented memories and stories and any journals maybe, or any videos or anything like that. That's all that's really left of you once you're gone. It's like you are this physical form, and someone can interview you and they can talk to you and they can figure out who you are and you can interact with them. But once you're gone, all that's left is the memory and the sort of the ethereal nature of your writings and video. Now obviously we have a lot of video, but even sometimes even not everybody's most organic natural moments are caught on camera, right? There's not a camera on you all the time. We do see, it's kind of funny when you go through some of the video from like the 90s, 2000s, when parents are capturing like birthday parties and stuff, you do get these little glimpses into who they were, and those are pretty organic, and you get the birthdays and you get the whatever, and kind of that vintage footage idea is kind of funny. But you're not everybody's a YouTuber that has a vlogging camera right on their face all the time, capturing every single moment of every day. And even then, the vloggers know when to turn the cameras off, And I think the thing about journaling, and I've been doing it in this Better Self journal for a while from my Catalyst Club. I don't know if I can get to the proper page here or not. Yeah, it's a Better Self journal. So there are just moments you have in here, not moments, but you have like a whole page for capturing ideas here. And of course, anybody, you can have I have another journal that's all just lines, but those are kind of the things like where your ideas are. And there's like books by the Stoics, like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and all these other places that are really just collections of journals, or Socrates, Plato. Some of them weren't even written by those men. It's just written by the people that listened to their lectures. Even books like Art of Acting by Stella Adler. I think Sandy Meisner's book is the same way. And an actor prepares, I think, is the same way, like where their students or at least their assistant is taking notes through a lot of this stuff. That's really all there is left of you. And it kind of reminded me of in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, where um, Harvey Dent is this light, to the city, the knight in shining armor, and then he eventually gets brought down, and the commissioner and Batman decide to turn him into a lie, right, and say, well, he was what Gotham needed in the White Knight, and he was just the savior to the city and the beacon of hope. And then Bane in the third movie obviously exposes that to everybody and says, this is all you had was this lie, and I've even taken that from you. And I'm totally butchering all of the quotes that may be related to that. But at the end of the day, it's like, regardless of how you die or regardless of how you live, all that's left is like this weird distortion of it based on people's memory. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't live that way, because that's also how people remember you. And it's a strange paradox, right? If you live like a piece of crap person, people will remember that, and it could be potentially worse than you were. And if you live like a very virtuous person, people will remember that, but they won't remember all of it. They won't remember every bit of you. They may remember sour moments of you. They may not. There are pieces of you that just leave once you're gone. So I think my real note is like, cultivate the person you are and live that way until death, if possible. And you're going to have moments in life where you have to compromise. I'm not going to say you will and you have to, but there are a lot of times when maybe those are the moments where you shouldn't. Like, is the moment, let's say you tithe every Sunday because you have the money, and the 1 month where you lose your job, do you keep tithing? Isn't that kind of the moment where you're trusting God with what you have left? And it's like, if I don't tithe because I need this money, do I deprive God of a chance to do a miracle? In a way, in someone else's life and in mine. At the same time, is it financially smart? No. Isn't that kind of the point of the faith-based decision, to continue to give your money to God even when it's hard? Yeah. I know that's kind of a deviation from the point, but being that if you are a person that gives of himself all the time, even when times are hard, and you say that, you kind of have to mean it. And the only way that people know that you mean it is when you really do it in the moments that it counts. Tithing or telling the truth or whatever it is. And you may find at moments in your life that you decide to deviate from that. I've been going through some of that in my own life, and like, man, I really wanted to be this type of person. And sometimes when it was hard, I could stick to that. And sometimes when it was hard, I said, you know what, maybe I need to alter my, I don't know, my ethos a little bit. I don't know if that's what you'd call it, but maybe I need to change that and say, you know what, it's not the person I'm going to be anymore, because that's not advantageous to me. And then you have to figure out, is it not advantageous in this moment? And is it only advantageous selfishly? Yeah, deeper questions there for sure. But the point being is that these guys trained very hard. They worked at it every day. And not only just trained in the controlled environment, but they were applying it. They were life and death every day, surrounded by people they didn't know in a land they didn't know. The one guy tried to get his wife there and she got sick. So he like tried to mesh work and exploration and passion and his family, and that did not work. I thought that was kind of funny. And he was even warned not to do that too, which is even better. But they were also ferocious men. And I think that is really I'm intrigued to see how the rest of this book goes, but I have a feeling that will be kind of a winding thread through this. Is these are ferocious men juxtaposed with the absolute insanity of what nature can bring, whether that's man-eating lions or rushing rivers or deadly diseases. These men were like not to be messed with. And the one guy, he captures like 6 guys at one time and feels so confident, and they are so afraid of him that he actually gives them their weapons back because he was tired of carrying them. He's like, I have 6 spears and I frankly just don't have enough hands or the strength to keep doing this. Here's your weapons back. Don't mess with me. And they just didn't. These men were like not to be trifled with, and they meant it. They went through, one of them gets speared by a rhino and scratched up on the back and almost loses his arm and all this stuff. And like, but they were bred, like they were hard men, and I think we see a lot of fakery of that today, where people have, like, you can kind of work out in the gym, and people talk about like functional strength and stuff, but that working out of the gym only gets you so far, because how many people are you really going to hit? You know what I'm saying? To stand up for what you believe in, to protect the ones you love, to create societal change. Like, I'm going to use my force and violence to break you because I believe what I'm breaking you for is morally right. You know, that's what these guys were doing. They were exploring, or they were saving other people's lives, or they were creating an empire or building a bridge that was going to change things. They needed to be these hard, disciplined men in order to make those things happen. And they obviously went to war and killed people. Um, how often in our lives are we doing things like that? As much as we work out or train with firearms or whatever it is, like how much are we actually putting that into practice? And we really don't. I mean, because the law in general, I think, has kind of stepped in and neutered people in a way. It's like in its birth, it was a great way to have a third party settle things in some way and to provide like a general protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. But then now it's become, people joke about all the time, like the I'm going to sue you culture. Anytime, or I'm just going to call the cops for whatever it is. Men can't look each other in the eye now or settle their differences, even without like just fighting. People talk about that all the time. Like, oh, in the old days, we used to duel. Yes, but you're just using that as a cope now, where now it's not even like I can't even look a man in the eye, or a man, not me, but someone can't look a man in the eye and say, I disagree with what you're saying, and here's why. Just like a minor disagreement, level one. I disagree with that. And here's my thoughts. Tell me what you think. It's just kind of this like face in the ground, like, oh, well, that's like, your opinion or whatever. And well, it's like, okay, well, you're a grown man with hair on his chest and two kids, and you can't even tell a stranger, like, yeah, I don't agree with that. People just can't do that. I'm not saying everybody, but, and then not only that, but you go kind of to the next level and you see something wrong happening, or something that you really disagree with on like a moral level, or something that's changing the society around you. And it's just kind of like this, that's not there. That's not there. I don't see that anymore. Like, I don't, no, I'll just deal with it. Maybe it'll quiet down or go away or make itself non-existent somewhere else, instead of standing up and saying, stop doing that. Don't say that. Don't talk to my wife that way, or whatever the scenario may be. We've lost a lot of that sort of masculinity in a way, I guess you could say, that sort of fervor and that intensity, where these men, they'd have no problem telling somebody, you shut your mouth, hit them with a beer bottle or whatever. I'm not saying we need to get back to a total lack of decorum, but you can tell that there's like this absolute beast packaged in these two men. And I think that's incredibly admirable. And it kind of instigates something in me to be like, where in my life, in my day-to-day life, can I just go, you know what, I'm going to put my foot down there. And I think it's hard for people to come off, because when they're surrounded by this environment, right? They're surrounded by wild animals and these, like they mentioned, like these 6'6" indigenous, just lean, shredded warriors that just wore loincloths, right? They're surrounded by this attitude as well. It's very difficult in like an office job to act that way. Those environments don't mesh, but I think that's certainly something that men being together can cultivate. And I had quite a bit of that, especially in my time with friends in California, where we did have debates or even just conversations where we were like, you know what, I disagree with that. And it was so encouraging to see men say that. And like, sometimes you could kind of see the anxiety build up in a man to say, yeah, I just don't like that, like, and to actually like get it out and get over that hump, because we're so used to being very agreeable people all the time. And it's very safe. So that's something, like I said, juxtaposed to the nature that they were surrounded by, the absolute beasts of these like 500-pound cats. There's one point it talks about how he's hitting one in the back of the head. And the author's like, there's no way that animal was actually being hurt by that, like the bludgeoning or being knocked out, but it was probably enough to distract the animal to make it think that there were two people. There's one part where he shoots one of them and it barely penetrates even the fur. That's how dense and thick these animals were, that the bullet didn't even penetrate all the way through the fur or hair or whatever. These were beasts. And the river in the first one, they're building that bridge in the Savo area. is another area. It's another where they built the bridge, but they said they had to beat the rain, otherwise the entire project was going under. The entire season of like the monsoon season and the floods and stuff like that. All the men that died, the 30 or however men that died, would have died totally in vain, because if this river would have come through, it would have destroyed the bridge and taken everything with it. And he writes how right at the end of that, all of the temporary beams and things that supported the bridge were just like washed away with the river at a perfect time. You know, they had maybe a few days, but really those last few weeks, if they were off just by a few more weeks, that season would have come through and just stripped all of their hard work away. So it just goes to show that in nature, even just water is a beast. Like it just won't stop for you. And that's something I learned even the few times I surfed in California. I mean, I rock climbed and weightlifted pretty regularly. I mean, hit some PRs and stuff, but rock climbed often and thought I was pretty strong. And I realized it's a totally different set of muscles and endurance for surfing. You know, you're using a lot of shoulder, and even though I had probably good lats from climbing and stuff, the shoulder and arm combination and the legs and the mechanics are totally different. Core strength to stay on, but the water doesn't stop. You can keep fighting it and fighting and fighting, but eventually you have to learn to do like the turtle roll, or you have to learn how to dunk dive and all this stuff, because you will not brute force yourself through the waves. The waves just don't stop. And sometimes they're harder, you know, depending on the time of day or depending on a storm or whatever's going on, they're harder than normal. And so I gained a lot of respect for nature in general, but especially for water. It just doesn't stop sometimes. So the flip side of that is how much you need it to survive, right? They talk about how in the book there's a point where a guy dehydrated in the jungle, where you would think there would be an abundance of water or luscious plants or rainfall or whatever. And the dude within 3 days got separated and dehydrated and just died. You know, water and nature in general is just so powerful. And it's amazing how much of our life revolves around something you can't even control. Something that David and I have talked about on a few of our chats is like growing our own food and stuff, because we talk about the homestead life and things like that. And at the end of the day, you still rely on rain and water and the groundwater, mulching to keep water in your soil, all kinds of stuff in order to keep your plants alive. And that's why I think it's good to have renewable sources of water, or even more, I really mean like self-sufficient water sources and rainfall and things like that you can have stored. Because let's say the government does turn your water off. Let's say you do have a leaky pipe. Let's say something happens and you have no way to get water from the spigot to your plants. You know, there are all kinds of methods that you need in place to be able to carry that water and transport it in order to keep your food alive and to keep you alive. You have to be able to clean it, store it, you know, capture it, store it, clean it, use it. I guess that'd be kind of the order. You know, water itself is just, even so still, it can be so powerful. If you jump off a bridge and you hit it, it's like the equivalent of falling on concrete. If that water level has not been, that water tension has not been broken, you know, it could just snap your bones, break your face if you were to dive into water that's not like moving, you know? So I think that's really about everything I had. But, you know, for all that we are and all that we want to be, nature and God can still end you. You know, your heart can just stop. Your body can just run out of water. You know, you can get caught by a riptide. You know, you can get stung by a mosquito. You know, they talk about malaria almost killed this guy and a bunch of other people. And sometimes just the smallest pathogens that are out of whack in your body can, if your terrain isn't right, can just totally screw you. You know, but I like I said, I think some of the major things were the way that these men lived, cultivated their character and personality. They lived that, and then they died in a way that was according to the way that they lived. And they are remembered as such. They're remembered by their writings. They're remembered by the memories of others. And yet it's probably still not even a perfect look at these men. So I think that really is just the way I'm kind of reviewing these two chapters, and the way that it's really kind of settled with me. Like I said, as I reviewed this, it really kind of washed over me. And the way I see reading a lot of these books and going through some of the stuff, it kind of falls like snow in a way. I'm not going to remember everything from this book. I'm not going to remember everything from Deep Work or from, Think and Grow Rich, because it's just you only retain so much as you read, and you can read it again and again and take notes on it again, which is helpful. But I'm not going to reread everything that I've read. But this one really kind of like fell like snow in a way, and it's like I looked out the next morning and then I see all of the accumulated snowfall. You know what I'm saying? Like the hours and hours of that settled. And then as I did the review, I was like, wow, that's what it looks like to wake up on a snow day. As I reviewed this, is like pulling these notes. It was so easy to pull so much from just 2 chapters because it just really settled and marinated over the last 2 days. So I would attribute that certainly to the intensity of these stories, but also the way it's written. So far, so good. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I've only done 2 chapters. Our next reading for next week on that we will cover on the 25th will be chapters 3 and 4. I believe that's correct. Let me double check that. I'll kind of wrap it up here, but through my notes here, chapters 3 and 4, yes, pages 73 to 144 for the 25th. So it's about 10 pages a day. Not a hard read at all. I really probably read it effectively within 4 days. So it's really not that bad. It's very exciting and very well written. A lot of personality to this book. And it's not really all that long. It's like 200-something pages. So I would encourage anybody that has not read this or is not reading this with us to pick this up. Just the first 2 chapters have been great. And there's not a lot of like, I would say, I say that, but, I read something like Atomic Habits. I think I mentioned that a little bit last week. There's so many little things to pick up and implement, and not a lot of them are truly foundational, life-changing ideas, but they are foundational. But it's all these little things, and I'm making a ton of notes here. Like I said, I just didn't highlight anything, but as I just went over and did a light read through, I was like, wow, these 2 guys, there's so much to learn from them. So I think it's a great book, and I'm hoping that I have just as much insight from the next 2 chapters. So if you watched this time around, thank you so much for tuning in. It is almost 9 o'clock. I've been given about 15 minutes, so start the Zoom call at 8. And then if no one's hopping in, about 8:15 is when I'll actually go live with these. So I've just kind of been reviewing and reading something. Beforehand, I've been reading stuff David and I talked about, Patient Heal Thyself. It's been an incredible book as well. I'm about a quarter of the way through this. A lot of detailed medical information, learning tons about the gut microbiome. So that's another book I'm going through as well. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed my insights on this. Just want to chat every week with somebody or a camera about these. So I had a great time. C.H. Stigand and J.H. Patterson were who we learned from this week. So I'm looking forward to the next 2 gentlemen or stories. And hopefully you will join me on the next one. And hopefully you enjoy this as well. So catch you next time.